So, did Family Guy finally drop one of the best episodes of season 24? Because honestly, Friends' Best Man feels like classic Family Guy chaos mixed with surprisingly smart character comedy. This episode has awkward friendship drama, hilarious wedding disasters, Peter Griffin being completely unhinged, and some genuinely funny Stewie moments. Today, we're reviewing everything about this episode: the humor, the pacing, the character writing, the cutaway gags, and whether this is actually one of the strongest modern Family Guy episodes. And trust me, Peter somehow turns a simple wedding situation into absolute chaos. So hit that like button, subscribe for more Family Guy reviews, and let's talk about Season 24, Episode 13, Friends' Best Man. Right from the beginning, this episode already feels faster and more focused than some earlier Season 24 episodes. The opening jokes land quickly, the dialogue feels sharp, and most importantly, the episode actually knows what kind of story it wants to tell. That's something modern Family Guy sometimes struggles with. Usually the show throws random jokes everywhere and hopes something works. But here, the friendship and wedding theme keeps everything connected. And honestly, that helps the comedy feel stronger. The episode mainly focuses on Brian trying to act mature while Peter becomes weirdly competitive about friendship, which is honestly the perfect setup for chaos. Brian spends the episode trying to look emotionally intelligent. Meanwhile, Peter acts like friendship is some kind of sport, and the contrast between those two personalities creates most of the funniest moments. The pacing is also surprisingly good. There's barely any dead space. Almost every scene either has a joke, an awkward interaction, or some random visual gag happening in the background. Now, let's be honest for a second. Peter Griffin completely steals this episode. His entire motivation is basically, if Brian gets attention for being a best man, then I need more attention. And somehow that simple idea becomes one of the funniest parts of the episode. Peter spends the entire episode trying way too hard to prove he's an amazing friend. But because he's Peter Griffin, every situation becomes worse. That's what makes the character work after all these years. He's not trying to destroy things. He genuinely thinks he's helping, which somehow makes the disasters even funnier. There's one scene where Peter gives terrible friendship advice with complete confidence. And honestly, that scene feels like classic old-school Family Guy. The episode also uses Peter perfectly without overdoing him. Sometimes modern Family Guy makes Peter too random. But here, his stupidity actually connects to the story, and that makes the humor feel much more natural. One of the best parts of this episode is definitely the Brian and Stewie chemistry. The writers clearly understand these characters. Brian keeps trying to sound mature and emotionally deep, and Stewie spends the entire episode destroying his ego. Their dialogue honestly feels sharper here than it has in several recent episodes. Stewie especially gets some of the funniest lines. Every time Brian starts acting fake intellectual, Stewie immediately calls him out. And honestly, that dynamic never gets old. The episode also does something smart. Instead of pretending Brian is always right, it fully embraces his flaws. He's awkward, he overthinks everything, and he constantly tries too hard to impress people. That self-awareness actually makes Brian more entertaining. There's even a scene where Brian tries giving an emotional speech and accidentally makes the entire moment about himself, which is the most Brian thing ever, and the awkward silence afterward is absolutely hilarious. The cringe humor in this episode works really well. Not because it's loud, but because the situations feel painfully believable. Now let's talk about the actual comedy. Because surprisingly, this episode is consistently funny. Not every joke lands perfectly. There are definitely a couple cutaways that go on too long. But compared to weaker modern Family Guy episodes, the humor here feels much more balanced. The cutaway gags actually connect to the episode instead of feeling completely random. That's a huge improvement. One of the funniest cutaways involves Peter imagining best men as action movie heroes. And the episode suddenly turns into this ridiculous, fake Hollywood movie. It's over the top. It's stupid. And honestly, that's exactly the kind of Family Guy humor fans love. The wedding scenes also create a lot of visual comedy. Background characters reacting awkwardly, random chaos happening during serious moments, and Peter somehow making every situation worse within seconds. Even Joe and Cleveland get decent moments, which honestly feels refreshing. The side characters actually feel useful here instead of just existing for one joke. So why are people enjoying this episode more than some recent episodes? Honestly, I think it comes down to character writing. This episode remembers why these characters are funny. Peter is childish and destructive. Brian is insecure but pretends to be sophisticated. Stewie is brutally honest, and the humor comes naturally from those personalities. That's when Family Guy works best. The episode also avoids relying too much on shock humor. Instead of just trying to offend people every 5 seconds, the comedy mostly comes from awkward human behavior. And honestly, that style feels way more entertaining now. The pacing also deserves credit. The episode moves quickly without feeling rushed. Scenes don't overstay their welcome, and the story stays surprisingly focused the entire time. That balance between chaos and structure is something modern Family Guy doesn't always get right, but this episode handles it pretty well. So overall, is Friends Best Man one of the better season 24 episodes? Honestly, yeah, it's funny. The character interactions work. Peter is hilarious. Stewie gets great dialogue, and the episode actually feels focused instead of completely random. Not every joke is perfect. There are still a few moments where the humor drags a little, but compared to some weaker modern Family Guy episodes, this one feels much more confident. It honestly reminds me why people still watch this show after all these years. When Family Guy focuses on character chemistry instead of non-stop randomness, it can still be really entertaining. Overall, I'd give this episode an 8 out of 10. Definitely one of the stronger episodes of the season so far. But now I want to know what you think. Did you enjoy Friends Best Man? What was your favorite joke? And do you think Family Guy is improving again? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this review, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more Family Guy reviews and breakdowns. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.